and someone would have started dumping their coin.
Yeah, people already, I mean, even leading up, like CZ gets a lot of the credit for it, but like already, like a day before, act that bill, and now that it was all a fraud, or the guy who basically pushed it was a fraud, now they're like trying to retool it. Everyone loses confidence. Everyone sells their FTT tokens. No one wants to buy it. It's worth nothing.
So how did this all fall apart?
Great question. So of ads, like get-rich-quick schemes. Like you've got a bunch of people, you know, flexing in their Lamborghinis, telling you, you know, they're like 25 years old, telling you want to get rich by 25 or 22. I'll show you. I made $1 million. I saw this, and my experiences up to that point, it kind of led me to like, I want to say something, but why is nobody saying anything? It just seemed like there was this, you know, these people pitching this stuff, and nobody was talking about it. So I made this random video, and it's like sort of what's left after the guy who kind of was spearheading this bill like was a fraud. It's kind of tough. I was actually randomly like I started hearing about these tokens, and they're like, hey, selling courses, like it's always the new grift. You always have to find, because people figure it out. Like they go like, oh, that actually doesn't work. Like, hey, drop shipping is there's no Ethereum left. There's no Bitcoin left. You don't have the real tokens anymore. You just have your sort of nonsense FTT tokens, the tokens you invented. And he said, oh, I start covering it, and then I start to get cease and desist letters. They don't like that. So they start to send me, they say, hey, you better shut up or we're going to sue you. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to stop making these videos. I just 5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I don't want to give off the idea that like there's nothing here. But the problem is that with the stuff, you're just having to trust these shady offshore entities that they're telling the truth. Binance says they're fine. They show proof of reserves, but what are their liabilities? But ultimately, the outcome of that is like, yeah, I encrypt all your data. Joe, send me. I know you're this successful podcaster. I want you to send me everything. I don't have access to the book. Like I basically knew nothing. So anytime you'd call him out on an issue, you'd say, where's the money? He goes, well, I don't know. It's gone. It's Alameda Research. Ask Alameda. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like people get away with it. It's just there's too many people doing it. And you'll catch some people, but ultimately a lot of people will just basically skate by, even though by all rights they should have been. So if you default on that loan, I'm out $1 million. Another way is I ask for, okay, I'll take some equity in the studio if something goes wrong, right? So I cover my butt if you default on it. Now, he blamed all the wrongdoing of FTX on Alameda Research. And he said, I don't control Alameda Research. Even though he was the owner, he's no longer, right? It's all at some address. And so people were asking, like, you say you have all this Bitcoin, where's the Bitcoin? You say you have all this Ethereum, where's the Ethereum? I'm blanking on the name right now. But
A1Z? What is that?
No, I'm sorry. I'm blanking on, it's this famous, I'm going to remember it right after I get out of here. It's one of the famous, make something work. If it's going to go to the public, you have to solve all these issues. And unfortunately, we saw crypto kind of go mainstream before they had these guys. Basically, a lot of these people backed Sam with the highest endorsements. And so if you're just an average person, you're thinking, well, how much more due diligence can I do than all these other guys? I kept making the videos, and ultimately they never did. But I start doing that, and after I cover get-rich-quick schemes for a while, FTX said in their terms of service. So one of the really big problems was they actually weren't doing that, but nobody knew because nobody had a look at their books. Like it was very opaque, and it just was kind of. I was just trying to find my way. I was just trying to even before that, I had done a show where I was like trying to break down these topics. I was like, senator's office reached out to me, and they're like, "What do you think about this?" And I was like, "I don't know, man. You guys have to. This is y'all's thing to figure out. Ultimately, your lack of regulation and the ability to send peer to peer, which means like you and I can just send money to each other directly, no middleman. There's also a really huge opportunity for fraud, scams. Your issue is that anytime there's demand for withdrawals, you're going to encounter problems. So it was going to be inevitable anytime, any store. So before, it's like if I send you $1 and then you send that dollar on, we can easily trace that back to me, right? It's like here. But if I send $1 to you and everyone's sending you $1, and then you're sending $1 to all, I'm a millionaire by the time I'm 23 years old. Just buy my course. My course is, $2,000. pay me $2,000, I'll teach you to get rich quick.
So it wasn't a scam. I've said this before because I root for nerds to like be that successful that you just completely living outside the norms of society, just fucking inevitable.
It is inevitable. So something to understand. FTX was insolvent long before it was realized that they were insolvent. Right? So that's ultimately going to find out what we're doing here.
How many more of these are out there in the world?
As big as FTX, they bring on people like Tom Brady to promote it, Larry David in the Super Bowl. They kind of get buy-in from all these big sort of names and also Washington. And I think there was like a tweet from Sam saying like, oh, like I'll see you the next time you're in Washington or something like that. But like it was kind of a dig because he knows CZ can't go to Washington. Like he would be.
Or is it just pure addiction? I think, those multiplayer games, those, online role-playing games, that's what that is, right? It's like
I think it's is it a MOBA? But like, it was very clear the internal conversations were they knew they were committing fraud. They knew they were doing things wrong. And this idea was, well, no one's going to catch us, right? Nobody's like, if you're from this one, you're not okay. Or I might say, hey, like CZ has connections to China. Like maybe that's a problem. Or CZ has connections to here. Maybe that's a big DTT. So it looks like, if you just look at their assets, it looks like they're covering their liabilities. They owe customers $10 billion. Looks like they have $10 billion. But like, this is what was going on in crypto. They're called collateralized loans. But what FTX was doing was they were saying, hey, like, we'll take $1 million from you, but instead of giving you Z on Twitter, I probably butchered his name, but he was actually originally sort of an ally of Sam. So he invested in FTX early on, put $100 million in, and a lateral like dollars or like some asset will give you FTT tokens, which is their own invented coin, and that should have value if anything goes wrong. And people were accepting that as value. But what I know is everyone's always interested in pulling up the ladder after them and like building the kind of the rule book around like, hey, like if you're from this certain jurisdiction that we're a part of, you're fine. If you're not, like that's the issue was FTX's problem was not CZ. Ultimately, he's kind of the guy who like pushed over the House mates left. And ultimately, because they had lost billions of dollars, it left billions of dollars in credit claims, basically. They didn't have the money.
And in the FTX case, how much of it was getting celebrities to endorse the platform?
It's huge. This is what I wanted to say. Like, the more I studied, literally had a $10 billion account that he mislabeled with Alameda Research.
Mislabeled?
Yeah, they've recently been shut down. But the idea was
just the idea of putting your money into Tornado Cash.
Yeah, it's wild.
Is there a better
touch your money? Obviously, that was the whole point. It's like you deposit with us, we're not going to do anything with your money. It's your money. It's like a deposit. Like it's almost like a bank. Like you deposit with a bank. Your bank isn't supposed to go ahead and take your money. Shocking thing, and I think that shows like if you're running a shady empire, like who's better than a shady lawyer to try to help you cover it up, right?
How did you get involved?
And ultimately, one of the ways, like even some of the candidates they donated to were through like a third employee we didn't even know about. And they were like donating through him for like all these, he's like, well, like think of it like a box. And, you tell a bunch of investors, hey, if you put money in this box, we can get some money out. So I decided to start pursuing it step by step. And at first it was like just me discovering like, well, what is this? Well, how does this scheme work? Okay, so I buy this course and then what? Well, actually, campaign finance laws I've heard are pretty weak. I forget the name of the law, but it was passed in like the early 2000s, 2010s maybe, where it actually became very easy to donate gay. So like, can you do this?
So someone had to be gay to do it? Like,
no, basically they were like, we need someone trustworthy we can trust to do this. So, hey, you're going to be the guy. Like they're like, look, I've been screwed by the banks. Every time the government's printing a bunch of money, where do I go? Right? You can understand the appeal, but it's just like he thinks he can reestablish control because he's so smart. He is such a good liar that he's like, I can just lie my way out of it. So I think that's why he ultimately talked. His idea was, if I of what's was going on. Now he's still like trying to say he did nothing wrong. He maintains he's innocent. And right now, actually, the big like kind of scam, you put $100,000 into this little mixer, and then it sends $100,000 out later, and nobody knows where that money came from.
What is a mixer? How does it work?
It's interesting. So the most famous example is Tornado Cap. Scandal now is they're finding a bunch of campaign finance violations because he was trying to influence politics, U.S. politics. I mean, it's insane how deep that her and I believe Gary Wang were big executives. They're cooperating. They pled guilty. They're cooperating with the feds. I mean, they did this from the arms of one huckster to another. Like it's just like it's almost to something worse. They just make this problem go away. This is the CEO. Like, go blame it on somebody else. Go blame it on some third party that got access to our website. Say it was like a glitch or something. And so that and she would drink it up because she thought that would make her better. Ultimately, my dad convinced her, like, you got to get the surgery. Like, this ain't gonna fly. You have to ultimately get the surgery. And it's like, well, what's fungibility mean? It means whether you were a guy withdrawing who is this degenerate day trader, this big mess right now, and we're waiting for regulators to figure it out. Finally, regulators have stepped on the scene, but right now it's just this kind of wild, wild west.
Do something like that. Like, why would he publicly communicate?
This is why it's so interesting to me to look at fraud. Like, this is why it fascinates me, as well as I think it's an important thing. What he said in one of the interviews, he goes, no one believes me when I said I donated dark, because no one believes anyone would be like, everyone wants the credit for donating. No one believes that I just do it on the sly. When you withdraw, there's nothing tying your Ethereum to your particular address to like this random external address, because you send it to a different one. Sam goes, oh, you won like our battle. And people were like, is it a battle when you lose billions of dollars of customers? If you're Alameda Research and you're funneling money through a personal investor, that I think is the problem. Nobody knew what was going on behind the scenes. So even though they said, like, we're not going to touch your money, as soon as you deposited Bitcoin, I mean, I talked to some of the insiders at Alameda. They said they had this backdoor, really taken that. I mean, maybe some of them were taking it seriously, but not enough. So
if FTX didn't encourage regulation and CZ didn't get upset at that,
A1Z, A16Z, it was one of those, Sequoia or A16Z. One of them wrote this glowing review of Sam, basically saying he's going to be one of the first trillionaires. So all the on sticks or something. Like, it was never, the problem was the foundation was wrong from the beginning. If you don't have enough deposits to cover withdrawals, you just don't have the money, right? You're able the account fiat at FTX. And so what prosecutors are now arguing is he knew, of course, what it was. He deliberately obscured. Very strange. And these offshore entities were also using like U.S. branches. Like, there's FTX US, which was like more regulated, but not really that regulated. It's changed that money for some type of crypto token. There's a lot of different tokens out there. And
explain tokens, because I don't understand tokens. I know there's crypto and there's tokens. Like, what is the difference between the two?
Friedberg, shady. This guy
allegedly shady.
Dan Friedberg. No, he's definitely shady. I'll say that. This guy.
What was his? I remember, but what was his?
You can take that money and you can send it to what's called a mixer, which is this like fancy language for a way to like anonymize your transaction. Like, you put it tease for a while, but like, so I eventually like pivoted into this crypto direction and learned all about that. But it started just from a curiosity about scammers, and I wanted somebody to say, why not? Like, there were just no adults in that room, and like the few adults that there were like, they had like a criminal lawyer. Well, anyway, I don't think he's actually been convicted of anything. I shouldn't say that. They had this guy, Dan, caught. In my view, what he did was criminal. That's why I started. But it hasn't been prosecuted or anything like that. But he's on a leaked private call. Everyone can go listen to it yourself. It's just this. They're setting it up with like, I used to be broke like you. Well, that's a strategy. A lot of these guys were never broke. Right? It's just part of the story you have to tell to be really effective. It's like your hands in both pockets. But publicly, he's just like, he's donating to Democrats because he says, oh, I'm like this, like, you know, I care about all these issues.
Yeah.
But it's like even more cynical than just buying one party. And that video has aged so well because it's like people are like, oh, it was all true. But people were outright calling it a fraud. Like Mark Cohodes, he's a famous short seller. It's a strange time, man, to be covering crypto, because I tried to tell people for years that this scam problem, this fraud problem,
each other on amphetamines and making billions of dollars. Like, it sounds like a great story if it wasn't illegitimate.
Yeah, ultimately that's the problem. Like, Sam was just hopped up on amphetamine. Is not surgery. You can just treat it naturally. Just don't worry about, hey, don't listen to the doctors. Don't listen to your general practitioner. You can just treat it with like colloidal silver. Where's the money? I don't know. But he controls everything. And so it's like this is the tactic of these offshore companies is like you put to their other friends. They're all saying it's okay. Let me put money in. And it's just a huge case study that just because other people lied my way into it, I can sort of lie my way out of it. And this is what he did. So prior to this, I'd interviewed him twice before, and I had kind of gotten hamstrung with he's just so good at dodging stuff. Sort of, this is a fraud because, no one knew. There's a bunch of backing. So I made a video at the time being like, this crypto CEO just describes a Ponzi scheme. Will fall for something doesn't mean you're safe. Like, you have to do... I hate to say do your own research because that's such an overused, like, scammy phrase. It's actually such like a phrase like that, it's almost used money and go start trading with it. Unless, obviously we have FDIC insurance, stuff like that. But like they didn't have that. They just take your money, go trade with it, and that's where the disaster started. But even Western Union has been they've been getting kind of pinched a little bit. Like, hey, you guys got to stop allowing all of this. But in crypto, because there's no, the CZ says, hey, maybe they don't have the money. I don't know, whatever. I'm just going to sell like $2 billion worth.
But he knew what he was doing.
Oh, for sure. He's a shark. And then he goes into the crypto space and he launches FTX.
He's very young, right? How old is he?
I think he is young. I'm not, maybe you can look that up, Jamie. 31. All these other wallets that it's impossible to know which of those new wallets my dollar's from. It's like, it's just crazy. It's a crazy idea, is buying both, lying about it so that you can get all the good press of like caring about all these social issues while also not caring at all. And like one of the first things the guy does is he controls it, but he renounces ownership. He goes, oh, I'm passing it off to some sham director. And he goes, I don't have anything to do. I don't know. Right people in charge who are going to take the fall. You resign, and then you blame it on them later when everything goes wrong. His problem, though, is Caroline Ellison flipped on him.
So she definitely flipped on him.
She was smart. Yeah. She cooperated. All the crypto people were trying to control regulations to favor their individual business situation. And so CZ felt like he was being cut out in wash crypto keys all the time. I mean, it's kind of an interesting idea where you go, I'm going to get in before everyone else. But a lot give you this yield. He starts explaining like this thing that sounds exactly like a Ponzi scheme. And so ultimately, Matt Levine's like, yeah, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. But again, it stops short. Or, something like Europe or something like that is you are subject to all these regulations which require you to be a little more careful.
Oh, those are pesky.
Yeah, they're in dark where it's like, you can donate through super PACs, political action committees, and you can donate as much as you want, and you don't have to be, your name has to appear nowhere. And so that's actually, you can't do that and then say, oops, I played a little too much of my video games and lost billions of dollars. Like, this doesn't fly.
Well, he wasn't saying that I played the video games, and that's why I lost the money.
But I mean, he was, really well regarded in Wall Street. So when people invested with him, they knew the, like, returns were insane, but money system. I mean, yeah, especially in our modern age, I mean, it seems like you can understand where they're coming from, the average person.
Involved in what you do.
It's a weird thing.
So when did you start your YouTube channel?
So I started it a few years ago, 2018, 2019, fine. And then FTX US went bankrupt. And he's the one who put it into bankruptcy. and then he's telling everyone, oh, no, the money's actually still there. I mean, he was constantly giving a conflicting narrative. You do not get to that level and not know that things were wrong.
Well, reading her tweets about amphetamine use was pretty wild, too. The whole scene was wild.
Reasons that our banks have a bunch of anti-money laundering laws. There's a reason that they have all sorts of finance laws. It's not for their safety. It's for your safety. I mean, it's like they need to money to a politician on my behalf. You're a straw donor. You're not really a donor. So Alameda was using customer funds to pay off politicians in order to try to get favorable. We're just going to do a few transactions through your name. That just came out in a press release. It's the new charges. He was basically like they call them straw donors, because it's like, if I give money to you to give everybody, I ask him, and he doesn't want to talk to me. So, but he's going on these Twitter spaces. So I was tracking when he'd go on a Twitter space, and I would contact the people ahead of time and said, hey, do these trades that are profitable in crypto. So the way he first made his money was he did something where he bought Bitcoin in the U.S. and then he sold it on these Japanese. Found out how to be successful. And if you invest with me, I'll save you time. You know, you could do it yourself, Joe. You could do it. But it's going to take you 5 years. Get with me, and I'm going to shortcut your at the end when you're like ready for this thing to go down, because I know as soon as I get on, it's going to end pretty quickly after. I said, let me ask him some real hard questions. Because all these guys are like, Sam, we're a company, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, like 100x leverage. I hate doctors so much, and it always seems to like end up with a sales pitch. Like it never was like, hey, let me just give you this free thing. It was like always like there's a catch. Mm-hmm. So I didn't.
Whiz kid, who you listen to him talk, he has an answer for everything. He's so articulate. He's so knowledgeable. Like I listened to previous interviews before he got busted. Analogy for losing your house.
What's funny? Yeah.
I mean, good Lord.
The idea of these mixers was you'd anonymize your transactions. So, like, let's say I Coinbase or something like that.
Right.
So FTX launches. Let's start with who Sam Bankman-Fried is. He's kind of at the center of all of this. Sam Bankman-Fried is this guy who comes. He's the son of two Harvard lawyers. Calling that a fraud early. I have a buddy of mine. He goes by Dirty Bubble Media on Twitter. He's like one of the Anon Twitter accounts. He was calling it a fraud. So they were paying everybody to promote this FTX crypto exchange. And the idea is this is the next big thing, right? And this is where you're going to make money. Okay, so this is funny. They found his League of Legends account. And during some of the calls after it was a fraud, you could hear him clicking in the background. Click, 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 click. He's playing League. So the person's not named in the report who was donating to Democrats. We know the one donating to Republicans was Ryan Salami. But that person eventually, Elizabeth Warren wrote a letter to them. They're being looked at much more closely. I mean, ultimately, all of these things are so opaque in the sense that story broke that showed that maybe they're not as healthy as they should be. There would have been a run on the banks and people would have found out. It's just like, when are they going to find out? He happened to be the final straw, if that makes sense.
So someone would have gotten away with it?
So many of these scams are like these issues of either regulators not having time, not having the resources around, right? Kevin O'Leary's in. So you kind of think you're swimming safely with like other savvy investors. And that's what ultimately gets you to buy in. Bernie Madoff is very similar. You think you have this backstop because on the books it's worth, X dollars. Let's say it's like worth $5 a coin. But what you're not realizing is the real risk is when FTX can't pay you back, they probably can't pay anyone back money. Like, well, how can you view this as a battle? Like, but he viewed it as like we're sparring partners. Like, and you won this round or you won the war.
Because he thinks this is going to go on forever.
These exchanges where it was worth more. So he was arbitraging this difference in prices. And then after he made his money that way, don't invest. Like, that's a bad idea.
People were calling bullshit, though. Just like they were calling... There was a few people that were wary that were calling bullshit on Bernie Madoff, and there was a few people.
He's one of the leaders at the NASDAQ. I mean, he was one of the go-to guys, and so you thought, well, I invest with Bernie, like I can't lose. It's like almost, betting on the house. Like the house always wins, right? So when FTX was taking off, it just seemed like everyone who was a someone was backing him. So then it was okay. And then I think a lot of these people deferred LGBTQ plus causes. And it was through a guy, and the guy was like, I feel a little uncomfortable with this. And they said, well, we don't have anyone trustworthy at FTX we can donate through. Or with just put a bunch of garlic cloves in the pot. I still remember our house like reeked. She would put 60 cloves of garlic in a stew. Really, everyone got to look at it all at once in one place. And people noticed, like, wait a second. A lot of their assets are just their own tokens. Like they had a Serum token, which they control most of. Actually, his whole technique of shifting the blame like onto Alameda and like, I don't control Alameda. I've seen something very similar. I'm investigating this Ponzi scheme that's offshore. Is the experience of the lawyer that FTX then hires is like being complicit on a private call, leaked private call, trying to cover up this God mode scam. That is his background. And so I asked, Sam, I was like, what does it say if this is your chief regulatory officer? This guy, Tom Brady, backs him. Well, Tom Brady's got to have some guys who are looking into this. And then it's like, well, BlackRock backed him. Well, BlackRock definitely has some guys who looked into it. Right. It's Sequoia Capital. They said he was, it wasn't like he was some random fly-by-night guy. He was well respected in the Wall Street space. People thought he might take over the SEC after like the current person had stepped down. They thought he was going to take it over. Whoa. Like he cleaned up on all his own customers. Just basically taking their money. Like, oh, I know exactly when to fold. I know exactly when to bet. So he had God mode enabled, and then they found out was going to undo sort of everything. Like if you don't root out the scams, you don't find ways to solve that, this is never going to work. Because if you're
regulators, when he was trying to impose regulations or encourage regulations, how could that have benefited him as opposed to Binance? Like what could they have possibly done to make it easy?
I have 2 employees, and both of them are overseas. Like one of them's in London, one of them's in Ukraine. And so for me, I have to pay them, and I have to do this
down because it seems like they received additional scrutiny, right? Because now people are starting to look at it, and I saw that their value went down considerably.
In the terms of service, they said results may vary. What's that about? Mm-hmm. I mean, ultimately, it's like, and so I realized, like, oh, there's this sophisticated way that they're preying on my psychology, and then
go back to making money again.
I don't think he thought he would repay everyone, but everyone thought like, oh, we'll just enter Chapter 11 bankruptcy, we'll restructure the company, we'll reopen, we'll just turn all the debt into